Welcome to the final top stitching video. Here I have my bag fully clipped around the top, ready for top stitching. I like to start on the back of the bag, right in the seam where the side accent meets the back panel. And I like to pull long threads from my needle and start with my needle down right in that seam. And I'm going to show you that as I'm doing it. All right, I have prepared for top stitching by winding a new bobbin. I've added a new needle. I've changed my foot. I made sure that my top thread had enough on the spool, and I am ready to go. So I like to start with my needle down right in the seam where the side accent piece meets the back panel, right in that seam. So I'll put my needle down and kind of hide the beginning of my stitches right there. I've pulled long threads from my needle, and I'm just gonna go really, really slow. I'm gonna set my speed all the way down to slow and make sure that your zipper placket and the zipper tails stay out of your way. I'm leaving the entire top stitching portion of this video uncut so that you can see how I manipulate the bag as I go. One thing to note is how slow I'm going and how every time I need to remove a clip, I stop my needle. Coming around these curves can be a little bit tricky, but I adjust the bag so that my needle can stay an equal distance away from the edge of the bag at all times. So here I'm moving my zipper placket out of the way, and sewing down this sort of dip in the front of the bag is a little bit more difficult. But I'm just going slow, and I'm stopping every time I need to remove a clip. And I'm going to reach through and help guide this around this curve here. Okay, and I need to pull a little bit more to the front. Now, like I said, I'm not cutting this portion, so you're going to see me struggle with the clip getting caught on my machine. Okay, now I've approached the side of the bag that has the zipper tails, so I'm just keeping an eye on those. Because they definitely want to get caught by the needle. Now I'm using a stitch in the ditch foot here. It's a foot that actually came with my machine, and it has a little ridge running down the center of the foot, so I can run that ridge along the edge of my bag, and that helps me keep an equal distance away from the edge while I'm top stitching. Okay, we are almost done here. I'm just gonna come around this one last curve. And I'm gonna make sure that this is open as much as it can be. All right, we are ready to end our stitches here in the next couple of stitches. And I am just going to stop with my needle down in the seam, so the very same place that we started, and I'm going to lift my needle and pull long threads. All right, I am now checking around the entire outside of my top stitching, and it all went very smoothly around all of the corners. And now we have 4 long threads that we need to feed into the bag. So first, what I like to do is use this long upholstery needle that I got at my local Joann's, and I just feed the needle in to the hole of the stitches where I ended my stitch line, and I'm feeding it up through the layers between the exterior and the interior. So between those layers, I'm just going to feed that needle up and through, and then I'm going to thread the needle with these long threads that I pulled from my needle at the beginning and the end. And so I threaded that long upholstery needle, and I'm going to pull them up through, so they're no longer on the outside of the bag. They've now been pulled up through, and they're in between the layers, in between the interior and the exterior of the bag. And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside here. I've got 2 long threads here, so I'm just going to put my needle in right at that stitch hole, and I'm going to feed it up through the layers, and I'm going to actually try and get the needle to come out of the in between the layers at the same point that these 2 threads came out. And then I'm going to thread the needle. I like to thread the needle after so that I don't have to worry about losing the threads while I'm working the needle. So I'm going to thread the needle now. Okay. And pull those up through. So now I have 4 threads that are pulled from the outside and the inside of the bag up through the 2 layers. And I'm going to give that a tie. So I'm going to do all 4 tied together at one time. And I'm going to do 3 knots. Just to make that really, really strong. And then I'm going to take my needle again, and I'm going to feed it down in between the layers right where the knot is. And I'm going to make sure that I don't catch any of the liner or the exterior in my needle. So I'm actually going to pull the liner kind of away from the needle so that I made sure that the needle is kind of moving freely in between the 2 layers. It's not caught by any of the layers. And then I'm going to thread all 4 of these through the eye of the needle. And I like to do it all at one time because the eye of this needle is pretty big. So I can do all 4 threads all at one time. But if you need to do 1 thread or even 2 threads at one time, then that's perfectly fine. And then I'm going to reach in through the hole in the liner and grab this needle and pull it through. So all threads are going to be in between the liner and the exterior, and this might take a little bit of working just to pull all of that through all at one time. There we go. So now you can no longer see where I started or stopped my stitches, and you don't have any long stitching on the outside of your bag. Next, we are going to be closing up the hole in the liner. So open up your zipper pocket and pull out the zipper pocket liner. So this is my zipper pocket liner, and I'm going to reach in through the hole at the bottom of the zipper pocket liner, and I'm going to pull out the interior of my bag through the zipper pocket. So you're now looking at the wrong side of each of your liner panels, just like this. So this is my zipper pocket liner, and this is the liner of my bag. And I am going to clip the two bottom edges of my liner together so that I can sew those closed. Okay, and I'm gonna take this over to my machine and stitch these closed. At our regular seam allowance. And for now, the corners of the interior are not clipped together. We are going to be doing that in a second step. So just across the bottom of the liner panels, we're gonna stitch back stitching at the start and stop. Okay, so the bottom of my interior is now closed up. The two liner panels are sewn with our regular seam allowance straight across the bottom. And now we are going to close up the corners of our liner. So this is our bottom seam and this is our side seam. And I'm gonna open up the bottom seam and match it up with the side seam of the liner panels, and then clip that together. And then the boxed corners should align so that you can clip all the way across these corners here. Just like that. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side before I stitch this side. So again, I'm gonna pull this out enough to where I can get to that side seam. I'm gonna open up the bottom seam that we just sewed, and I'm gonna line it up with the side seam that is already stitched open. And I'm gonna clip that. And then these boxed corners should open up and align themselves. So I'm gonna stitch across here at our regular seam allowance. Make sure that bottom seam stays open as you're stitching. Okay, and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, next we are going to trim down this seam allowance. And I'm going to trim across this corner here, making sure not to get any other liner in my scissors. And I'm going to trim across the bottom seam. And then this corner as well. right, now our liner is closed up. We can push that back down through the zipper pocket and then kind of situate it inside the bag. Push it down into the corners of the bag so that it sits nicely. And before I push the zipper pocket back down into the pocket, I am going to close this up. And I like to open up the side seam of the zipper pocket liner and then fold it back on itself like this. Then I take it and I fold it this way so that all raw edges are nice and encased. And that is a nice and crisp corner. And then I'm going to clip this and do it again on the other side, and I'll show you again. So this is the other side of the zipper pocket liner, and I'm taking the side seam, I'm opening it up, and then I'm going to fold it down on itself, and then I'm going to take it and fold it like this. And so now that corner is folded so all edges are encased as well. And that keeps everything from bunching too much in here at this corner, and then it's much easier to stitch through. And I'm going to clip that. And then I'm going to fold over the edges of the pocket and clip as I go. So I fold the edges about a ½ inch in and then put them together and clip these closed. Okay, again, I'm going to fold it so it's wrong sides together with itself, and then I can put the two sides together like this and clip. All right, so the edge of the zipper pocket is now all folded over. All the raw edges are encased inside, and it's clipped so we can sew it together. And I'm just going to start from this corner and stitch close to the edge. And stitch all the way across. Okay, the bottom of our pocket is now stitched closed, and I'm going to push that pocket liner down into the pocket and make sure those corners are pushed all the way down and zip it up. And the inside of your bag should now look like this, with everything closed up.